What's up, YouTube? Demi here with a spoilers update slash balance manifesto discussion. The league just ended yesterday. I've been working on clearing out all my investment stuff in standard, sorting out my stuff. But in the meantime, let's go over a couple different things. So first thing that I missed before, they actually showcased the Synthesis Challenge Rewards, which look really good actually. The 12 challenges is a helmet attachment, looks like a Protoss attachment basically to me. I like it. The next little thing is a pet, which is like a floating jewel looking thing with lighting inside of it. I really like that one as well. I love any of the League Challenge pets. And then of course 36 challenges, you get some sick Protoss looking wings. And the pet looks great too. I don't know, I like it. I'm getting some serious StarCraft vibes, maybe a little bit of Halo mixed in with the monitor. Whatever that, was it monitor? Oracle? Oracle, I think that's what it's called in Halo. And then of course the totem. I never care about the totems personally. I always get 36 challenges that you get like 36 is up to here, and then this is if you get 40, that topper. I don't personally ever go for the toppers myself. All of mine are for 36 challenges because I think they look a little bit more consistent. But yeah, those look pretty good. Nothing too crazy there. Other little bit of information stuff, they migrated yesterday, which again, I just mentioned already. You merge into your parent league. If you're in Betrayal SSF, you go to Standard SSF. Private league mods will remain until the duration ends, but they lose Betrayal mod, whatever. And then Azerite from Betrayal League will be added to Standard League Azerite. Your deepest delve mine will be the one that remains. Your unveiled mods will be carried over to Standard, but you have to wait until you see Jun again, which will be on the day of patch notes on the 8th. Or on the day of the league start, sorry. You'll be able to find Jun in Standard and get all your veiled stuff back. Until then, you just kind of have to wait. Next two little things, they revealed another synthesized item base. Socketed gems have reduced mana reservation on a shield. We currently have a Shaper suffix for this for 15% reduced mana reservation. Wow, I could say that. So again, you can't get Shaper or synthesized bases at the same time. It's one or the other. So this is pretty cool. It's an implicit. Laminated Kite Shield usually has, I believe, 4% all resistance implicit, so it replaces that. This is a really powerful mod, but the fact that you can't get it on a Shaper or Elder Shield is kind of like, to me. I mean, maybe. I don't know. We'll see. It's a good mod for sure. It allows you to get more auras overall on any character. So if you're playing, if they also mentioned in the Balance Manifesto, which we'll go over in a second, that they're buffing like shield and caster nodes, casters with shields, casters while dual wielding, stuff like that. So this will be good for those people that want to use a shield and some kind of spellcaster weapon in their main hand. The next thing is a new notable passive, which is looks like, where is that? Right about, let's see, can I locate that? Where is that? It's off of this, I guess right here. In this little section. There's room for that. Alright, it's Ethereal Feast. It's spell damage, leases energy shield. You get percentage of your maximum energy shields and maximum total recovery per second from energy shield leech. And attack and cast speed while leeching energy shield. It's kind of hard to really know what this means. If you had 10k ES, that means you get 300 ES to your maximum total recovery per second from ES leech. I don't know, they're changing the leech mechanics, how they work with life versus ES, so it's a bit hard to know exactly what this means for now, but it's pretty cool to see a specific spell damage leech node on the skill tree. Right now we only have attack damage leech as life and mana on the tree, and then like I think Elementalist gets like some other stuff, but it's basically just lifeless attack. We get some actual spell damage leech on the tree, and then jewel implicits, and then items and some other places as well. So that's pretty cool to see. It'll like the fact that it's just pure energy shield leech means that you can play a hybrid character. We can be a life-based character with a little bit of an ES shield above you, and you'll be able to actually leech to that ES without losing life leech, which is nice. And then of course the next thing, the big talk, the big discussion, the development manifesto, which is like they give us some previews of all the big stuff, which is a lot of information before we even get to the patch notes. So we'll go ahead and get into it. Tomorrow we get the full patch notes. Today we get to talk about some major balance changes. They're mostly focused on hand casting. Spells. For the number of leagues, majority of people that use spells use totems, traps, or mines. And skills that do their work automatically over a long duration, so like Blade Vortex, Winter Orb. For this expansion, we focused on putting power back in the hands of casters, rewarding players who cast skills directly. They got new supports and changes to every damage spell in the game. So they reviewed and adjusted the base damage effectiveness of almost every primary damage spell. Included trap mines and totems. They're focused separately on balancing low and high levels, so they're trying to like buff out the weak spots. If it's weaker at a low level, they buff it at the low levels, leave it alone at the top, which is an important thing to realize. They're not just buffing the numbers across the board, because that would result in some broken leveling skills. But they're doing it so that it's like, if it's weak at endgame, they buff endgame. If it's weak at the beginning, they buff the beginning, you know, simple stuff. They've also reviewed Vol skills and skills from items. A small number of spells that we consider too powerful for their ease of use, like Brand, Winter Orb, and BV, have had their damage lowered. We get the full list in the patch notes. So this is actually interesting to me. I thought they were going to buff everything up to the level of those skills. I also mentioned that they didn't say Glacial Cascade here. They just brought up the like long duration hitting skills, which is interesting. But I guess that means they're going to get toned down slightly and everything else will be brought up to the level. So I guess that's okay. I mean, I don't know. Let me know what you guys think. Don't freak out. They're not going to be completely unplayable. They're just going to get toned down slightly. So they won't be as immediately broken as they are currently, which is fine. Mana costs of many skills have been adjusted to make the mana cost per cast time of skills much more consistent. That's good because melee is very consistent with that. There's no melee skills that are like ridiculously high cost compared to another one, so that's good. Except for maybe Consecrated Path. Most skills that were adjusted have their cost lowered. Good. There are a few exceptions to the cast time equivalent mana cost rule. Channeled skills are cheaper. Curses are more expensive. That makes sense. You don't cast curses that often, and channeling skills you have to hold down the button all the time, so it makes sense that they're cheaper than like self-casting, you know? There's also some changes they made to cast time. They basically just nerfed they buffed the cast speed on anything that was slow. So if it felt slow to cast, like Discharge, GC, Arc, Ice Nova, they made it faster. So that's all good. They just made it better to like self-cast it. It doesn't affect, like, the interesting thing is because it's a cast time thing, it doesn't affect Traps, Mines, and Triggers. It only buffs self-cast, so it's not like because they're buffing these specific skills, it's still going to be even better to play them as a cast on crit style character, for example. It's just buffing it if you're a self-cast character. Very smart way of buffing it, because if all they did was buff the damage numbers on like Glacial Cascade and Arc, then Miners would be even more powerful and Trappers would be even more powerful, and it wouldn't actually change the self-cast at all, because you would still want to go into those triggered versions, you know? Some skills that had lower AoE now have increased AoE, or they gain radius as their gems level. I believe I mentioned that in the last spoiler video, which is linked in the description of this video if you didn't see it yet. They're also giving us new options for AoE on the skill tree and on items, I think, so it'll help all of the little tiny AoE skills be more fun. That's pretty important. Yeah, I just mentioned that. New AoE on this passive tree for casters. They'll be doing that for melee in 3.7, the next league, but not in 3.6. They didn't have time to do all of it at once. So that's all cool. This is like a generic overall buff to self-cast and AoE for clear speed. Like, the main reason people don't like using certain skills, like for example, I'm just going to use Cleave because even though it's melee, I'm going to use it as an example. It has tiny AoE. It's got good damage, good mechanics, good like threshold jewels, but the AoE is so small in endgame you don't want to use it. So if they give it radius per level, or just a generic AoE buff, then people are more likely to use it because it feels better to play because you can actually clear the screen with it, you know? They made a few other changes, like they lowered the cooldown on Convocation, which is the bring all your minions to you spell. Pretty important for summoners, it's a good buff. They buffed Spark so it can hit targets faster after it pierces. They buffed Unearth so they fly faster, projectiles so you can actually port faster. I think that's a buff to Poet's Pen, actually. These are buffs. They did slightly nerf Arc here. They gave it a lower chain distance so that it can't clear the whole screen and then off screen. It'll just clear the screen instead of bouncing to the next pack. I actually like that. Arc shouldn't have all of the benefits that it currently has. It's like one of the best single target skills and the best clear skills. Doesn't make sense. It should be one or the other, not both. They buffed some support skills for numerical adjustments. Chain, Fork, and Spell Cascade and Innervate have been buffed across the board. Arcane Surge now has a more damage multiplier, which is really important. The reason this is good is because Arcane Surge is like one of the few ways to get mana regen without mana leech on a caster. It gives you more spell damage, more cast speed, and then some mana regen, right? If they give it an actual multiplier, people are willing to include that in their 6-link instead of just like having it on a Flame Dash support or something to get the buff every once in a while just for the mana regen. But if they give it an actual damage multiplier, people will include it all the time. It's kind of the same thing with Fortify for melee, because it's just like, it doesn't matter where you put it, it doesn't have a more multiplier on it, people just put it on the movement skill. It's the same thing with Arcane Surge for casters. If you put that with a more multiplier, then you can include it in your main 6-link and it becomes more specific towards casters or melee for Fortify, instead of just being a generic buff for every character. Onslaught and Summon Phantasm support now have effects on hitting rare or unique enemies, which means you're going to have a chance to gain Onslaught whenever you hit a rare or unique, and a chance to summon Phantasm whenever you hit a rare or unique instead of only on kill. This is a pretty big buff for leveling, Onslaught support especially, because a lot of leveling characters always run Onslaught in their 3-link or 4-link, because it's like, it gives you 20% movement speed, attack speed, cast speed. That's important, and now you have that ability to get that buff on the rare or uniques of the enemies, like while you're leveling against bosses and stuff like that, so you can actually have that buff for the boss fight without having to change out your links. The next thing, there's been some curse rework stuff. The really powerful endgame bosses have like negative 80% curse effect on them. Elder Shaper, All, etc. Guardians. They did that so that you can't just completely shut down the enemies with temp changes and people, which makes sense. They don't want the bosses to be trivialized, but they also want them to be relatively difficult. So they've lowered that so that you can actually get damage against the bosses with like Ellie weakness, projectile weakness, punishment, stuff like that. But they have given temp chains and enfeeble a separate value for like normal mobs versus rare and unique mobs, which is actually a pretty smart way to do this, because they want to rework curses, but they don't want to just nerf them into the ground, because it kind of kills the curse bot mentality. They basically just made it so that it's easier to, or it's the same to like crowd control white and magic mobs, but it's now harder to do it to rare and uniques, if that makes sense, with these two specific skills. The other ones are better. The minus resistance skills are better. They've also reduced the accuracy reduction on Enfeeble. So interesting note here, Enfeeble has been the #1 defensive buff in the game forever, and they're actually finally looking at it, which is, I don't know exactly how I feel about that. I mean, it probably deserves the nerf because it's so freaking good, and then if you're an occultist with all the curse effect and all the curse effect items and etc., it gets a little stupid. They reduces their accuracy, their crit, their damage, their multi. It's overall an insane skill. So I don't know, I like this. It means that curses are more viable in every situation, especially on boss fights, but the bosses are going to deal more damage because of this stuff. So I don't know, I'm okay with this. It makes sense to me. The next little thing is Energy Shield Leech. They've added new sources of ES Leech on support gems and for spells on the passive skill tree. A new support gem with Leech is interesting. I didn't know about that yet. Energy Shield has a lower cap on maximum restored per second than Life Leech, 10% of maximum per second. Life base is 20%, so it's got halved of whatever you normally would be able to leech with as a life-based character. But the dedicated Energy Shield Leech passes will let you increase this number. Ghost Reaver now doubles your maximum Energy Shield per second, in addition to turning all Life Leech into Energy Shield Leech and lowering your Energy Shield recharge rate. This makes it good for pure ES casters, as well as letting attacks have easy Energy Shield Leech access. I actually like this a lot, because currently what you have to do is you have to take Ghost Reaver so you can actually leech with your Life Leech, you know, and then like you have to travel way down here to get Volpack to double that. But since this Ghost Reaver node now doubles the Life Leech rate, you don't have to stretch all the way down to Volpack, which is good. And then there's other ways to get maximum Energy Shield Reach as well. Energy Shield Leech rate, sorry, as well. Okay, fine by me. This next thing is a pretty big nerf. So previously there was a leech length nerf. Previously there was no upper limit on how much an individual leech effect could restore. That meant with a very high damage hit with enough leech could last minutes, if not longer. You had an effect letting... Wait, yeah, if not longer. If you had an effect letting your leech remain on full life. Leech is not removed at full life is a Slayer thing or a Scion Slayer thing. Now there's a limit of 10% restored per leech effect, so each individual leech effect can't last more than 5 seconds. And for the Ascendant Slayer's passive skill, this is 5% lower. I'm not sure exactly what this means. If it means that it's 5% per leech effect, I don't know. But currently, like with my Slayer Flying Purple People, if we hit a pack and we murder it for like 1 billion damage, we get 20% of that as overkill leech. It's not removed until that shield is gone. Think of it as like a really long duration life pot. They've reduced that so it only can last 5 seconds, which is a pretty big nerf considering you can get like a minute or 2 or 3 or 4 of leech at sometimes. But at the same time, if you're in combat, it doesn't really matter. I'm not sure how impactful this will be yet. I haven't been able to test this. Obviously, we're not in the patch yet, but I think Flying Purple People is going to be slightly toned down for this, which I mean, probably deservedly. I leech something like 83% of my life per second for like a couple minutes. It's pretty hard to kill me. So this will reduce that down to 5 seconds out of combat. If you're still hitting things, it'll just keep piling up and you'll be fine. I don't know. We'll see how it feels. It is a nerf, but it could be not enough of a nerf to matter, depending on how you play the character. Like maybe the trap rooms in lab that last longer than 5 seconds we're going to have a problem with now, instead of just being able to tank them for a while. We'll see. We'll see. Let me know what you guys think about that. And of course, I'll be testing my builds after the patch notes hit to make sure they're still good as is. They've also made a large number of changes to the passive skill tree. They've added Energy Shield Leech and Elemental Leech as part of the Fire, Cold, and Lightning notables, which is like up here, these guys. So that's cool. The shadow area of the tree also has a small amount on a new Energy Shield and Evasion path. I believe that's what they showed us earlier, right here. I don't know, 100%. They've also adjusted caster weapon passives for staves, dual wielding, and shields for casters. These provide powerful bonuses to spells that previously only found on very generic skills, including a lot of cast speed for casters that are dual wielding, damage and defenses for those using shields, and bonuses to AoE for staves. So we're actually getting a staves buff for the first time in the history of ever that I can remember. So I like that. They're also making various additions and improvements to some underutilized passives that affect spellcasters. So I'm going to guess it's like stuff like, oh god, I don't even know. I don't know what these nodes, like these cast speed nodes aren't super popular. The holding a shield stuff isn't super popular. The stave clusters, where are they? These things aren't super popular. So hopefully, that's not even, where is it? Where's staves? They moved it. Staves over here. I don't even know where it is. I literally never play staves. So these are probably going to get buffed as well, which is pretty cool. Holding a shield, maybe some stuff over here. Block spell damage. I don't know if this is just going to stay defensively or we're going to get some like attack buffs there. Or caster buffs, sorry. We'll see. We'll see what happens. I like it. I don't know. Elemental damage wheel passives to the left of the Templar starting area and it has fewer LE damage skills and a single powerful elemental notable that combines some of the power of the two previous ones. It now includes two new notables that work very well with the new spells that convert fizz to fire or lightning. I believe that's about this area. They're probably just going to like merge this stuff into one section instead of like 3 different paths. I don't know exactly. They don't show us any of these things. It's just like, here's what we're doing, but we're not going to show you it. They've readjusted connections to the tree on the shadow starting area to be more consistent with the other classes, and they've changed the defensive projectile passives to have a simpler, widely useful set of bonuses. I'm sorry, this is hard to read. That is like this section. I always hated this section because it's just really awkward to path through. There's like weird triangles happening all the time, and these guys are all relatively smooth, you know? So that's cool. It'll just mean you save maybe some skill points, and it'll be a little bit easier to get stuff to go through it. It's cool by me. They've added 2 new channeling passive clusters. We saw one the other day, which is like up here for channeling. There's probably another one somewhere on this side of the tree. They seem to be really wanting to push Templar as the channeling ascendancy, or class, I guess, which is fine. Trickster changes. They've reworked Ghost Dance and Escape Artist to provide a unique reward for specializing in evasion and energy shield. Ghost Dance creates a ghost shroud every second, up to a maximum of 3. After you take a hit, it consumes the shroud and then it heals you based on your evasion rating. Heals ES based on evasion rating. It's an interesting thought, since Trickster's based off like dodge and evade, and then if you take a hit, then it just heals you immediately afterwards. It's kind of like when you block with an Aegis Aurora, you get the energy shield on block, except for it's based off your energy shield instead of armor. Or sorry, your evasion rating instead of armor. I like that. It's a pretty cool effect that we don't have anywhere else in the game. There's some parallels, obviously, but not the exact same thing. It's pretty cool. They've also added Frenzy and Power Charge generation while channeling the Swift Killer. Okay. So they are also pushing Trickster as a channeling ascendancy. I like that too. Alright, Inquisitor. We've heard a little bit about Reworks. They're buffing the Consecrated Ground stuff so that people actually take that side of the Inquisitor ascendancy instead of only the bottom crit side. They're giving it so that you just have Consecrated Ground whenever you're stationary, not on hit anymore, which is pretty cool. It's just like, if you're standing still, you got a buff. So if you're channeling, you got a buff. You stop to cast, you got a buff. You stop to attack, got a buff. And then Pious Path, makes the effects of Consecrated Ground linger for 4 seconds after you, but it doesn't affect your friends. So that's kind of weird. I'm not sure what exactly that means. Now let's see the effects of Consecrated Ground linger for 4 seconds after you. So you stand still, and then it's like, you get the effect for 4 seconds, but your friends don't? And your enemies don't? I'm not sure. Hard to tell. Maybe somebody who could read better than me can answer that question. These changes work well with a change to all Consecrated Ground that causes hits against enemies in it to have 100% increased critical strike chance. That's a pretty huge buff to every build that wants to use Consecrated Ground. There's a new unique flask coming in that's probably going to be best in slot for every melee build because it's like damage while on Consecrated Ground stuff. So pretty huge buff, especially for crit melee. They've also made some changes to critical strike chance. Previously, an effect that could crit was capped at 5% minimum and 95% maximum. They've set those to 0 and 100%. So you can actually get 100% crit strike chance now. Assassins, that's a buff. Rejoice. For LE Overload characters using Controlled Destruction, I think this might be a slight nerf here, because most spells have a base crit of 5. Controlled Destruction reduces that. So I don't know if it's going to like mean you have to actually invest slightly into crit to get reliable LE Overload crits or not. It might be a slight nerf to that. I'm not 100%. Effects that gave enemies an additional chance to be crit have all been changed to instead increase the chance of crits against them, or give crit before modifiers, as if the attacker had crits against the target rather than additional chance added on top. So this is like, I think this is a change of wording mostly. the base crit stuff versus increase versus global crit. Like, they're just trying to make it a little bit more clear. So all of that stuff, no more enemies to have a 2% chance to take crits. Doesn't really make sense. You just get increased critical strike chance, which makes more sense to everybody else. This next thing is a change for crafts. The non-chaos is extra chaos mod on weapons was too freaking powerful from veiled mods, so they've lowered it. Only on the spell damage and non-chaos is chaos, which makes sense. I mean, that's where they're buffing a bunch of spells and caster stuff, so they've toned down this non-chaos is extra chaos because it's a little bit too strong. That's a craft, that's fine. The veiled mod that grants this has been split into 4 different versions. You get non-fire as extra chaos, non-cold as extra chaos, non-lightning as extra chaos, and non-physical as extra chaos, I think. They're now available as a mod on commanding caster weapons above level 60 at a higher value, making it a powerful effect to find when creating a perfect weapon. So they actually added new mod pools to the caster weapons, which means that it's going to be even more difficult to actually try to craft a good caster weapon. Existing items will not be affected, so they're all going to go Legacy. Legacy non-chaos is chaos. Let's go. +1 totems, no longer available as veiled craft, so that's also going to be Legacy. If you have any of these made in the league, it's no longer craftable. It's a mod on Shaper shields. So if you have it on an Elder shield, for example, leave it. It's going to be worth a shitload. Unique nerfs, they've made some adjustments to a few unique items that were problematic. Details will be in the patch notes tomorrow. I'm going to take a wild guess here and say Lore Weave, Impulsos, Gluttony of Elements, and Unnatural Instinct, Might of the Meek, maybe? I think those are all being pretty problematic right now. They're a little bit too strong. What else is kind of broken? Headhunter? We might see a Headhunter nerf. I don't know. This is just blind speculation, but we'll see. And then, of course, they've made changes to nerf the immunity damage characters, which is pretty important. You can no longer get above 90% max res. Anything above that will have no effect. This is especially important as Synthesis introduces other sources of max res. We've seen a helmet with a max res implicit, so they're probably referencing that. The Vol Impurity auras, for those that don't know, you can Vol Purity of Elements and whatnot to get Vol Impurity of whatever. You now get less damage taken of their element instead of immunity, and you get less effect per level, whatever. The Gluttony of Elements skill, which is the amulet that we talked about for Blade Vortex immunity builds, it now provides Curse immunity to prevent interactions with temp chains letting it last too long. Technically, this is a buff. This is probably one of the smartest things that they've ever done to nerf something without totally killing it. So the skill means that when you use Gluttony of Elements, when you take elemental damage, it heals you instead of taking damage. So if you have enough negative resistances, you heal for more than you take so you don't die. It applies at the same time. But you could change that. Because the skill had a really short duration, you could only get so much skill effect duration on the tree and whatnot. People were temp changing themselves to make the buff last forever before they could like recharge it. But now they've made it so that it gives you curse immunity, so you can no longer temp change yourself, but you can still use it for its intended purpose to survive like a burst hit or something like that, like the tank Phoenix's discharge, for example. That's what it's meant to be used for, not to become immune all the time. And so yeah, they technically buffed it. They gave it a huge defensive mechanic, but they've nerfed the characters that are abusing the temp chains mechanic. I like that. It's very smart. Of course, there's a bunch more stuff on the future. Attacks are getting the same attention next league, as well as changes to Abyss Jewels and physical weapon damage. Okay, we might see Abyss damage nerfs. Good. We might also see some two-handed weapon buffs, ideally, with this. And these changes will be over 3.7 and beyond, so that's coming over after this next league. But this is huge. Like, Abyss Jewels are fucking broken, and physical weapon damage doesn't make sense that it's kind of the same scaling on two-handed versus one. So, yeah. Hopefully they just buff the base damage on two-handers, like a Volax base damage, I believe, is like 120. If they made it like 200, it'd be a lot better. And you wouldn't have to change the percentages and like make all the rolls legacy or anything like that. Just buff the base damage. It's the same thing that they did with energy shield nerfs back in 2.6. They nerfed the actual like amount of energy shield on the gear itself. Like Vol Regalia went from like 175 to 150, and that was a global change. Nobody had a divine for it. It just like nerfed it across the board, which is pretty cool. So they could also just buff it across the board, you know. So yeah, full patch notes tomorrow. I'll probably review it live on stream. Twitch.tv/Demi if you're not already following me. Get on over there. And of course I'll link all this stuff in the description of the video if you want to take over a look at it yourself. But let me know what you guys think. This is pretty cool across the board. The only thing I have a complaint about is nerfing Slayer, but it's probably fine because the melee buffs are coming and we'll just have to tough it out for another league. We should be okay. But hope you guys enjoyed the video. You know what to do if you did. Leave a like, leave a comment, subscribe if you haven't already. And I'll see you on Discord or Twitch or whatever. I don't know. New merch description as well. That'll be Demi out.